Well, I thought we'd start with watching a video that we have. It's on the Phineas Wolcott Cook Family Organization channel. So it's about 7 minutes and it's just talking a little bit about the settling of Goshen. So I thought we'll watch that and then we can discuss anything that I mentioned in the video or in the chapters that we read, which were all about moving to Goshen. So let me share my screen and audio. Can you,
Make
yeah,
you both here. There you go. Yeah, this is on our YouTube channel. Anybody just type into YouTube, Phineas Wolcott Cook Family, and it'll come up with our channel with tens of movies, with all of these recordings and our meetings the last few years recorded and things like this too.
yeah, all right. Can you see this, the video?
Hmm.
All right, let me know if you have any trouble hearing it, but I think it should be good.
Yeah, it's good.
In the early spring of 1857, Phineas Cook, looking for his lost horses, set out with two other men who refused to stay with him and returned to Payson. Finn rode alone and followed their tracks in the mud and snow for 3 or 4 miles to the mouth of the canyon, where Salt Creek passes through the mountains between Juab and Utah Valley. This creek is now called Current Creek. He came upon a group of Indians and inquired about his missing horses. After receiving a negative answer from them regarding the horses, Finn stayed on the trail beside Little Salt Creek, crossing it several times. To his recollection came a memory of this canyon. President Young had counseled the brethren to build a road through the canyon to Utah Lake. Finn had heard it was impossible for people to pass through it, let alone build a road, but he thought it could easily be constructed. At this point in his search, curiosity caused him to give up looking for his horses and see the trail to its end.
As he rode through the mountain of the narrow canyon, Finn saw wide open space as far as the eye could see. He saw signs of an abandoned Indian camp, the remains of corn and wheat crops, but no signs of a pioneer settlement. He rode into the valley and dismounted from his horse. Upon examining the soil, he determined it to be good. Finn rode to the top of a bench overlooking the beautiful land, becoming more and more convinced that a good location existed there. After a day of riding and looking for his horses, and finding a land filled with so much promise, he headed home to Payson, his curiosity satisfied. He arrived about 9 p.m. to find his horses safe within the corral.
When Phineas realized he had no land in Spanish Fork or in Payson, he sought and received permission from Brigham Young to make a new settlement in the newly discovered land. With permission, he began in earnest to seek for others to join him. He asked community leaders to read to their congregations the letter from Brigham Young allowing people who needed land to immigrate to Goshen. Unfortunately, few of these leaders read the letter. Finn continually faced opposition, but with persistent effort, he soon had several families willing to move with him. Brigham Young stipulated that Finn must have 25 men willing to build a fort to keep the settlers safe. Finn had to push, prod, and encourage others to join him in the new valley. It was because of Phineas's great effort that enough men assembled together to create a new homestead. Constructing a dam across Little Salt Creek was one of the first orders of business for the new settlers as they looked forward to spring planting. Several men, 35 in all, who had some interest in settling Goshen, came into the valley to help in this project. The dam was made of wood stringers, cedar brush, dirt, and hay. Shortly after the dam was built, and before the first families arrived to settle Goshen, the dam sprung a leak. Finn, conscious of the money spent on the dam thus far, arranged repairs at very little cost. The cost to construct the dam was $800. The current dam sits near the original site, built in the fall of 1857. The construction of Fort Sodom began in November 1857 under the direction of Bishop Cook. The enclosure covered about 2 acres and was laid out in a square. The walls were built of large cedar posts and filled in with sod from the nearby meadow. This provided the needed protection for both man and beast. The buildings inside the fort were mostly log cabins with sod chimneys and gunny sacks over the windows in place of glass. Other dwellings inside the fort were dugouts. At night, cattle, horses, and sheep were locked inside the fort. Guards were on duty both day and night. Indians usually attacked on Sunday, knowing everyone was at church.
In the fall of 1858, a school was started. The students met in Bishop Cook's home. The home was one log room with willows, canes, and dirt for the roof. There was no floor. In the spring of 1859, the fort flooded, making it unlivable. The current owner of the land where the fort stood, Jeff Steele, stated his property floods every year in the spring.
When the fort was dismantled in 1859, the pioneers couldn't agree where to make a permanent settlement. Some moved to the Bend, others to Sandtown and Mechanicsville. Eventually, most moved to Lower Goshen. We aren't sure where Bishop Cook resided, but after he was released as bishop in 1860, he moved his family to the west side of Utah Lake. Brigham Young made the final decision where the permanent settlement would be, which is the town's current location. This monument is located 300 yards south of the cemetery. The monument plaque reads, "The original Goshen Pioneer Cemetery, in ground made sacred by the sacrifice of original and native pioneers who gave their all for their faith." There were 3 sons and 2 daughters born to Phineas and Ann Eliza while living in Goshen. Sadly, their 2 daughters, Mary, born in 1857, and Martha, born in 1861, died on the day of their birth. Neither daughter was listed on the monument. However, it is possible they are buried there. This photograph shows the sacred location and was measured and photographed by Seth Porter.
Still pretty sparsely populated.
Yeah. I really like the aerial shot where you can see Utah Lake and then the mountains and then the valley where the Goshen is. That toward the beginning, I've never seen a picture like that. And I can't really picture this road going through the mountain up toward Utah Lake, and I've never driven it. Or why it was so hard to get there from Payson. But I guess now Payson, we go around to get there, right? I-15 like goes around down from Payson, and then you have to take that road west. It's not quite what I imagine a valley. When they say, here's the valley, and it's just all this flat.
There wasn't much, but it would have been nice if they could have erased those trucks and modern day things in there, but there wasn't much of it even today, right?
Yeah, it kind of looks like Finn's time.
Yeah. And I thought that when we saw that tour, when Dave gave us that tour down in at the reunion, I thought it was interesting that Sodom Town was not named after Sodom in the Bible. I think that's important to point out. It was called Sodom Town because they made all their huts out of sod. And so that's why they called it Sodom Town, because it kind of sounds like, but maybe it was kind of like horrible, like except maybe not wicked, but horrible like Sodom. I don't know.
Yeah, I liked reading in the book that the phrase Sodom up meant make your homes out of sod, like Sodom up. Well, that's what we've got. We got to make a home, so Sodom up.
Yeah, I wondered why they picked that name too.
I can't even imagine having a home out of sod. We're so spoiled rotten today.
We are.
And then they said a lot of homes when they first started, they Phineas moved there in December, so they said the first homes were dugouts, but it's not like they have hills to dig out, and they just dug. Carl Cook said there was some quote from him in there that they just dug pits and kind of put straw over them. I mean, did they live in pits for a month or two? What? I don't get that.
Yeah, it was very common for the saints to build a dugout to survive the cold weather.
Yeah.
Until
Just
they-
like, come on, kids, jump in. We're just gonna lay here at the bottom of this pit for a month. Hop out. You need to go to the bathroom. I'm in love with Little House on the Prairie and that whole thing. And a couple years ago, I went to her, where she lived in Minnesota and in South Dakota. And in one of those places, I think it was South Dakota, they had a dugout made that you could walk in and, sort of think about what she lived on the banks of Plum Creek when they made that dugout. And my first thought was the smell. You walk in there, it was mildew, like dirt. I guess it is dirt. It's not like what I imagined when I read about Ma sweeping her dirt floor all clean, because it was not fun. I don't know if they were used to that sort of smell, but that's what I thought. Oh, is stink the right word? It just smelled like mildew. And that was a toughie. So of all the tough things, the smell's one of them.
I'm sure the smells were bad just with without outdoor conditions and bathrooms like we're used to, and taking baths regularly. I mean, they must have I don't know if they got used to it or it must have been horrific.
Yeah, must have been stinky. Yeah.
I remember somebody giving a talk and saying that they made their soap, and they took a bath once a week, and after their bath, they smelled worse from the soap than they did before.
Ah, so pick your poison, huh? Oh. Well, Catherine, we can't hear you. And I don't know why, because I don't think you're muted. Maybe you're not connected audio. Now you're muted.
Now,
There. Now we can hear you.
my computer does that sometimes. Yeah, it was interesting to read in these chapters just all the obstacles that Phineas faced trying to settle Goshen. It seemed to take him about a year to actually get people there. He had permission to settle it, I think he got permission in like 1856, and then it pretty much took until like 1858 till people were actually moving there. But it talked about a lot of the obstacles. One, just needing to build a road. And it's kind of hard to imagine since we have a nice road going there now. But I'm guessing it just must have been still very mountainous or just tough terrain, even if it's not up a mountain to get there. That it must have just been very inaccessible to people. We heard things about water too. It being good soil there, but there needed to be, irrigation there if you're going to farm there um and have people settle there. And then of course Brigham Young requesting that there be a fort built first for protection, so getting men to be able to move there before, their wives and children move there and settle this fort and everything, just to keep them safe. We saw the fort in the video there. So all of these different obstacles and it sounded like Phineas was the main man in charge of making it happen.
Yeah, I wonder how you build a road. Do you lay logs? I think they talked about it somewhere, but I'm not sure they told us. A road to Goshen. There's page 143.
Yeah. And it's funny, it seemed to be a lot of I don't know if controversy, but people just not willing to build the road. But then it said once people decided to make it, they had it made in a month, which seems really fast.
Yeah, and it wasn't until 1963. So all those years, and I think Phineas was gone about then, or a couple of years after then. So
yeah, sorry. I imagine to make a road, they would make it more like a trail, but something a wagon could go over, that they just tried to level the ground and remove the big stones and make it as flat as they could. I'm sure it's nothing like we have today. And I'm sure dusty in the dry season and muddy in the wet season.
Yeah, it seemed like he had to run up to Salt Lake every other day, Brigham, I need this in writing. They don't believe me that you've said I can do this. See, now he doesn't believe me now. Brigham, am I really doing this? It was like 3 or 4 times he did that.
Yep.
Or Finn. Nobody wanted to believe him. And he's fighting the bishop. And I understood those issues were interesting. No, I think we should all stay together and help Payson with its work. Well, yeah, but I don't have a farm and I don't have any food. Yeah, but if you help us build our buildings, we'll get them done faster. Yeah, but again about me eating, the push and pull, and then the army coming and that threat. And so the kind of obstacles he had at that time was interesting.
Do you think Phineas's personality was, as I read this journal, he seems a little naive and so trusting, and he's taken advantage of so many times, and he doesn't really stand up, and I don't know. I just feel so sorry for him. I kind of think that having written this book and the family organization is making some of his life up to him. We're helping him feel okay about his life.
He was so obedient, almost to a fault. And
Yes.
I think sometimes when Brigham Young was awful, at least what it appears in the book, I think he was like saying, maybe Brigham Young was like, stand up for yourself a little bit, without saying it. And he didn't. He was just so determined to be obedient that at least us modern day readers, it's like to a fault. But yet I look back and I'm just so grateful that he was obedient and stayed faithful, because what my life is like now, So I'm so grateful to him for, even though I would never survive, I would have fought for myself. I have a friend who joined the church maybe 10 years ago or so, and she said, yeah, she says, I kind of feel like I've been a member, my whole life, because I lived that way and all my friends were that way. And my ancestors were members of the church. She said, but they were like your grandfather, only when Brigham Young told them to go make a settlement, they're like, no, we're not doing that. We'd starve to death. And they left the church. And so then she didn't have the gospel because her grandparents stood up for themselves, her ancestors. And so I'm grateful that he was willing to be obedient even at the cost of being hungry and suffering like he did. So
Kind of the push-pull of work for the community or work for yourself. And like 100% one or the other isn't good. You've got to have a little, I'm going to do for the community, but I got to make sure I'm taking care of myself, but I got to do for the community. And he did that, you know, he did the push pull. And this is his pull of, no, really, I need my own farm. But okay, I'm going to stay and help you with Payson for a little while, but okay, but you know, and maybe that's the when we're too much one way or the other. No, I'm just taking care of myself. You, all the rest of people, I don't care what happens to you. That's not good if we love our neighbor sort of morality. But if we just are totally altruistic, are we and our family getting taken care of too? So yeah, maybe some tension there is valuable.
I was struck by the impermanence of things. For instance, Phineas thinks he has this farmland, and yet he doesn't. And you know, today we have deeds and and the law, but so often he thought he had land, and then all of a sudden he doesn't have the land anymore. And I learned a new word these few chapters, mobocrat or mobocracy. I'd never heard that word before. And when I looked it up, I'm like, yeah, that's a fair descriptor sometimes of how it probably felt.
Yeah. I think that's why that it's amazing that Brigham Young had that much control over a vast Wild West land. But, you know, he's going up, they all respect him. And so he goes up to Brigham Young and gets this, no, Brigham's, and then the sheep guy, it sounds like eventually backed off. I mean, everybody eventually yields to Brigham. That's kind of amazing that it wasn't totally mob rule, that, hey, we're here, try and make me leave. So that's amazing that Brigham Young had that much control that's how he was this great colonizer is everyone went, okay, Brigham says it, we do it. And it wasn't just every little tribe for themselves and we arm ourselves and you come here and we're just all little infighting. That's what it would have been.
Brigham was the governor as well as the prophet, so he kind of had control of, both reigns of government.
Yeah. Until about this year, he was replaced in 52.
Oh, in 52.
So, yeah, he might have been in the legislature or something, but he only lasted
by most of the people respected him as the word
leader. Yeah. Yeah. Even if he wasn't the territorial governor, because Washington thought we can't have this Mormon running things too much there. So they put their own man in and nobody remembers who he is. Well, I think that dam is lovely. I still love that picture of the dam. I think it's really pretty. I guess it's not his original, but the rocks and the dam like that.
It is a beautiful area, and if you go through Goshen up to the canyon, you can go around the Nebo Loop. How many have been around the Nebo Loop? It is fabulous, beautiful. It's just gorgeous.
We did it the night of the reunion. After we left, we drove up and around. It was very pretty. So.
But it's rough country. And
even still, it's not populated very much.
Right. So I've been reading a journal on Bruce's side, and they settled Escalante, and the snow was just so much trouble, and they built those dugouts and covered it to get through the winter, and just to survive, so they could build something better and built roads, and even Escalante is still little today.
That's farther south, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's up over. You have to go over a lot of mountains to get to Escalante. So it was
Isn't
tough.
and isn't Escalante kind of the hole in the rock story when they went through Hole in the Rock?
Yes, I'm actually to that point. I haven't quite read it, but they're talking about getting through there.
And there they built a road because after they went through the Hole in the Rock, it was so steep down to get to the bottom. So they built the road, but they built it out of sand. And so the first wagon that went down just took all the sand with it. And then each time, it was harder to go down for the next wagon and the next wagon. And at the end, it was just really dangerous. So,
Well, even now it's not much. We stayed in a hotel. There were 2 hotels in the town actually, and one of them was closed because they went fishing. The one we stayed in, the bathroom was so little. It had a tub, but the tub was only about the size of my screen. And
Wow.
the toilet hit the sink cabinet, and so you had to step over it to even sit on it.
yeah.
And there were black widows.
Woo!
Lots
Isn't
of
that
them.
area a lot of slot canyons? There, those real narrow canyons that you can walk through.
I
Okay.
don't know about maybe. We've only done a few hikes up to there's a beautiful falls up there. Well, yeah, it says round staircase, so I guess that is. But they have a lot of water. They have waterfalls up there that are just so beautiful. And I can't remember what the name of the waterfall is we hiked to. But
Well, I hiked up to Hole in the Rock, and that was a very hard hike from the bottom up. And you hike from the lake. I mean, you're on the lake in a boat, and you have to go by boat to get to that point. And then at the top, there's a plaque. And I did it. I probably was, I don't know, 45, maybe 50. It was a really hard hike. I couldn't have made it without my kids helping me on a couple of the boulders. And I would not do it again. My kids have done it several times. I'm like, I'm staying in the boat. You guys haven't. It's hot, 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 like really hot. And steep. And then you're, like I said, you're climbing over some boulders. And I can't even imagine going down that in a wagon. But somehow they did. So, and they didn't find a nice cool lake at the bottom of it like we have now. There's a river, but not a nice cool lake.
Hmm.
yeah, his story, their story is kind of interesting because she wasn't too fond of polygamy. And she had 2 proposals from polygamous men, and it was, but you're married. Yeah, but I'm looking for another wife, but I don't love you. Well, that will come in time. Well,
Was your ancestor on
what?
this is on Bruce's side?
Yes, this is Bruce's great grandmother.
Oh, so
And
did she marry him?
wait, great grandmother. And
So
so her father was okay with her marrying polygamous, but he did not like the man she actually married at all, because he had married her, no, the father, not the man she married, but his father had married a woman that was a daughter of John D. Lee. And John D. Lee was put to death for the massacre of the Mountain Meadow Massacre. And so he hated him for that reason. And so even though she divorced him and he married someone else, Mary, her name was Mary. Mary's father held this grudge against the family, and he would not. She did marry him, but he wouldn't speak to her until she had a baby, and the baby died, and then 2 years later she had another baby, and they didn't make a reconciliation until that second child was born, because he was so angry with who she married. But he was okay with polygamy. It was okay for her to marry someone that was established, but not this young kid that came from this.
And his father was John D. Lee.
No, his father was Don Carlos, and Don Carlos married Adeline. I think her name was Adeline Lee. So it was his daughter that he married, but John D. Lee didn't like Don Carlos either, and he was the reason they got divorced. And so, but then, yeah. So history was interesting. It's really interesting. But anyway, I probably didn't explain that very well, but yeah, and the other weird thing is Adeline, well, I guess he was a polygamist, but Adeline did the senior, Don Carlos Sr. was a polygamist, but his first wife divorced him, the Adeline Lee. Adeline, I think it's Adeline Lee. And but they both had babies. Both his wives had babies. They didn't live in the same house. They both had babies the same year, and they both named them Don Carlos. One was Don Carlos II, one was Don Carlos Jr. And but they're constantly merging those two people on Family Search. But it's really interesting that they would pick the same name.
Yeah, Family Search conundrums.
Another interesting thing, though, is Mary's father. They first settled in Cache Valley, and it was so cold, and they survived. And it just amazes me they survived up there in that cold, miserable country. But he had one of their children they named after him, and with the mother's middle name, Josiah Woodard, something like that. Sorry, can't remember names very well. And then he had about the ninth child. He wouldn't give a commitment of what he was going to name the child until he got up to name him, and he named him Josiah W. And his wife said, "You can't name him that. That's the same name as our other son." He said, "No, his is John Woodard, and this one's John W." But I see in genealogy records that they've changed it to Joseph. But just interesting that, and they did. I'm working on some genealogy, and they use the same names over and over and over again, and it makes it so confusing. Who is who and what is what?
Well, and I see on page 210 that, the twins, Mary Rosalie and Mary Rosalia, are the same. I mean, they've got the same name, except for one has an A on and one has an E on the end of their second name. That seems so crazy. Maybe they didn't expect both of them to live, but yeah.
Whose twins were they? Because in Amanda Polly had a Mary Rosalia. Jennifer, isn't that you're from her? But she only had one. So did she have twins after that?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's on page 210.
Oh yeah, on page 209, it says that Mary Rosalie only lived 1 month. So yeah, one didn't survive very
So
long.
maybe that's why they thought that was okay.
That was Amanda Polly had one first, and then I think that was fairly common that if a baby died, you named the next baby after that one. And that does cause Family Search to have a headache. And if spelling wasn't very uniform back then, so they may have named them the same thing, but we spell it funny on. Mary Rosalie lived 1 month. Mary Rosalia lived to the age of 81. That's your question.
But like everyone was saying, if you're looking in like Family Search in the records, the spelling can kind of vary with the entry. So I can see why that would be confusing.
Yeah, I'll bet they get combined all the time if they're twins, same birthday, same name, same parents.
Well, and with Annalisa and her sister, it was same wedding day. She's been removed. At times I've seen that and I'm like, I asked Janet, I said, why does it just say Anne Marie and not Annalisa? And she said, because somebody took her off because they thought they were the same person because they got married on the same day and they were twins. So
first name,
It's really easy to do that, to merge people. And
that's why we're gonna have our own tree soon.
yes, that'll be good.
Nobody can touch. Yep.
Well, I found it interesting in the very beginning of the chapter, the April to June 1857, there was a little note saying, talking about Phineas's journal, how, and I'm sure some of you know this better than me, so if you want, yeah, you can talk more about this, but it seemed like the first, 36 pages is from an original journal, and then this next part is from papers, where he pretty much wrote a journal, but also a history of Goshen, and then printed these papers. And it said for people in Salt Lake City to distribute among those who suffered losses from Indians. And then later was given to the church in the church history library. Um, yeah, do we know any more about that and just about, because I know there were mentions of, you know, troubles with Indians, but a lot of, at least this first part is, more of just settling Goshen, all the trials with that. Um, and I know there's also something at the end, or a little thing in the end where it said, "This is how we know that this is Phineas's journal," because it used these phrases like, what is it? What to do was a mystery, things like that. Was there confusion of whether this was Phineas's journal or parts of this?
Yeah, Catherine might know more about this, but this was only discovered by Janet, our historian, like 2010, I want to say, Catherine Raspberry. Does that sound right? And
Oh, my mind wandered for a minute. What are
oh, you and Janet went to the library and spent all summer transcribing this because they wouldn't let him borrow it, and it took
Oh yeah.
God just for her to be able to see it. But so apparently, the story that I recall is Janet, in all her research, came across the littlest thing that would have meant nothing to anybody but Janet, that she thought
Sounded
I
like
sounded
yeah.
like him. And it was just an abstract about this record in the church history library. So she reads something and thinks, I think that history, I think Phineas might have been involved or wrote or something. So she tries super hard to get into the archive, and they won't let her. They won't know. Nobody can see that. It's church records. So church,
Bishop notes. It was written in his bishop's notes.
yeah,
So they
that's
would not have it for a long time, like 18 months she petitioned to get those. And
wow.
then they finally said, okay, yes, but you can't copy them. And then they finally gave her permission to transcribe, but she couldn't take pictures or anything. And then she was able to prove to them that at least 75% of it was really his personal journal. And so they gave her permission to publish it. I think she had to not publish anything that was Bishop's notes,
Hmm.
although there might be some of that in there. I don't know what she ended up having to do, but
Yeah. So I believe we have pictures of the whole journal. That's
yeah.
these papers just kind of bound together. And these papers he talks about in the journal, that I think he did it as kind of a money-making opportunity for him. That he would take these around to people and say, did you lose money from the Indians somehow?
Yeah, he did that.
This, the federal government will reimburse you. Is their way of saying, hey, if you go out to the West and lose it all, from the Indians, we'll reimburse you. Some kind of protection. So he charged them a little bit for this service. He was bringing them the paper and then taking it and mailing them all into the government. And I think he used it as a little money making for him. So he did this with the papers. So I guess he had all these, and there was a time frame that you had to turn in these papers. So he had all these forms left over from when the time expired, and he used these forms to write, because paper was it's hard to come by, to write this journal. So I think if you see on one of these pages, there's a picture of it,
Yeah.
of the form. I can't find it.
Then when Janet and I were transcribing it, she gets to a paper and I was helping her with it. And she gets to a paper where he's written one way. And then I guess he ran out of paper and he's turned it and written the other way. And I just thought, there's no way. We can't transcribe that. It's impossible. But she didn't give up. She did every page.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could have just kept going like she did. She was determined.
Page 150 has a little bit where you see territory of Utah. That's a little bit of the form.
Yeah, is it on page 138? There's a full page there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just see he's a scrappy guy. He's gonna find a way. Let's blow that up. And he kind of crossed it out, and then he's just writing his own thing in the blank. And then,
And
yeah,
he's
sometimes he wrote the other way. Anna Liza did that in her journals too. And you have to like try to form the word she's making and then try to erase that in your mind and try to see, okay, that goes with that word, so that's not going with this word.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, I'm sure it took her a long time to transcribe those pages,
yeah.
but it was interesting to me because, like, I've been studying the Doctrine and Covenants, obviously, and um, Joseph received from Joseph Knight, Joseph Smith received from Joseph Knight $50, which allowed him paper to be able to transcribe on and, to translate the Book of Mormon. Um, and it just made me think of our great-great-grandfather that paper was scarce. I mean, we have so much paper today, we don't know what to do with it half the time. I'm like, my drawer's full of little sticky notes and little pamphlets that I've gotten here and there. And then I've got a cupboard full of paper that grandkids can use, and it's cheap. But back then, that was hard to find paper. And so he absolutely had to have that money to be able to move forward with his work because he had no paper. And then just remember Phineas trying to find a pencil to take to that
yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Page 142 has a good one too, where his dedicatory prayer was written on an Indian depredation.
Mm.
Yeah. And Janet said there are other miracles regarding that, finding that journal. That I guess she hasn't told us all the story, but it was very recent. And I think, as I've read, so yeah, his memoirs ended right before this chapter. That's all he wrote. The rest of this book that we're reading is made of this journal and then letters and other things that he didn't write to the end of his life, which is sad because that's all of Johanna's family and everything. So we've pieced it together from other things. But what we would give to have a little more of his writing. And I thought that about Anna Liza when we published her diary. Oh, and there, I heard there's another one that somebody had at one time. And now that I've read the one, I really want to read this other one. And I think what we would give for just a little more. And she found this just 10 years ago, found this that had more of his life.
Yeah. And, of course, you probably know that this was pulled out of the fire, the one we have, that he had more and they burned them. I think there was some disgruntled family members or something, and they burned.
You don't throw stuff away, right, Lyle? You don't. Lyle's been
Yeah, because I keep losing computer files. I had everything on my computer, all my journal and everything, and got a new computer. And my husband went to, take all the old stuff and put on new stuff, but somehow it all got corrupted and I lost it all. He's really good at computers. And then we even took it down and said, can you find these files? And no, they couldn't. So
back up.
yeah, I know. And I thought
Cloud.
I was, but I wasn't.
Put them in the cloud.
Yeah.
Well, now, yeah.
And you have to keep up with all the, once it's on VHS, now nobody has VHS player. Now you gotta keep up with the latest things so that
Yeah.
you can read it someday. Yeah. Yeah. So I wish he had written more at this time about his family. We barely get a word about his wives or these children born. And I guess that's because he was kind of writing the ward history, the ward minutes while he was going. But we barely get a minute about the school. So what are his kids doing? What are his wives doing? Even one time they said somebody came with a complaint about one of his wives. And he said, I will not talk about my family, my wives. And I'm like, no, talk about it. We want to hear. So he shut that down and we've got nothing. So I guess that's kind of typical. Which
Yeah, I
makes
thought it was,
Liza's diary even more amazing. It's a woman's voice.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Anna Liza did keep a journal. Why don't we have that available?
We just published it. last
Oh.
month. Yeah, I'll put it in the next newsletter, but Allison and I and Becca worked really hard all last year, last summer and fall, and we published it. It had been transcribed. Somebody had typed it up once, and the original is in uh, the church history library. So you can see on the internet each page of the original. You can pull that up on the church history catalog. And so we took the transcription and we researched all the people in it and made notes about them. And we researched some about the events that she talks. She does only her last 2 years of her life. And we published it. So it's available on Amazon.
So on page 127, it says he's talking about Catherine being troublesome, which we know she was, and she was jealous, so that might have been a big part of it. She couldn't live polygamy, a lot of jealousy, but it says here, it says October 14th, Margaret has proposed to be sealed to me of her own free will and choice. This makes Catherine tenfold worse. Who's Margaret?
That's
Her,
Catherine's sister,
Catherine's
isn't
sister.
it?
Oh, it's
Mhm.
Catherine's sister, but then he never did get sealed to her, right?
he
No.
doesn't. There's a whole part in there about the boy who comes and steals her. And Phineas was like, she was going to be mine. That's some thanks I get for hiring you.
Okay. I didn't do my reading first, I'll be honest, so.
Well, David told me that Catherine's mother wanted to marry him, and he wasn't interested in that at all. He said, "I can't support you."
But he does marry Johanna's mother, who's
Oh, really? He had enough.
old. Well,
Sealed.
he's sealed to her later in Logan.
But
To
he
take
never
care of
lived
her.
with her, right?
No, I mean she was what 60 or 70 by then, and
He
well,
just did.
kind of 60 or 70 by then too. I think they just wanted to be sealed to
They
somebody.
did. Yes, a lot of people were just sealed to Brigham Young and
Yes.
Joseph Smith, and even though they had husbands, and it's
Right.
weird. A lot of things will have to be corrected there.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's what Catherine's mom was looking for, or if she was looking for a full-on polygamous husband. But interesting that he was like all about the sister, but then the mom, oh no, no, no.
Yeah, well, she was young. What man wouldn't want a younger wife rather than an older one? But he had a hard time taking care of the family he had. He was just struggling all the time, just starving. It just makes you feel so hopeless, and we have so much. We just
I think Catherine and her mom even saw what little he had as more than what they had. So, but
But
he
I
was
think-
much more well off when he married Johanna, so that was good. He was more well off for a minute until he lost it all. They moved to Wyoming. But that's why I figured he was doing well then and thought, now I could, have another wife.
Also, I think it was a way for women to be taken care of. If Catherine's mother could have married Phineas, she would always be secure in a place to live. And where she was not secure because he didn't want her to stay there anyway. I think he did finally ask her to leave, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, maybe the whole family was a little difficult, although he wanted the sister, so.
Mhm.
Marriage was certainly different then than now. Of course, so many now are end up in divorce, but it was easy for polygamous women to get a divorce. All they had to do was say, "I want a divorce," and it was granted.
Mhm.
I think we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Page 129 has a blank form of that doesn't have any writing on it. Has
Oh, yeah.
I have one last question I thought about this chapter. It said he named the Goshen after his Goshen, Connecticut. But then I saw somewhere there was something called the Goshute Indians. And I wondered if they were called Ghost Ute before there was a Goshen, or if we white people called them Ghost Ute because they were sort of the Utes that were around Goshen.
That'd be a good question, good thing to research, Marcia.
Yeah, where did I read about the Ghost Utes? It's toward the end. There it is. Page, it's a little farther on, 167.
Oh, okay.
Ghost Utes, related to the Shoshones, were enemies to the Timpanogos and Utes. Ghost Ute tribes lived on the land next to the West Mountains, south and west of Utah Lake, and in 1856 began what was known as the Tintic War to drive away the settlers. Chief Tintic was killed in the valley along with a number of settlers. The Timpanogos and Utes also lived in the valley, but on the eastern hillsides and canyons, often moving south to Sanpete Valley. So, yeah. See what Wikipedia says.
Yeah, I'm looking it up, and it doesn't sound like they were named after that because they weren't just in that area in Goshen or near Goshen, but they were all in like the Salt Lake area going west to Nevada. That's what it seems like.
The, the coincidence that the Ghost Utes ended up in Goshen. They don't call themselves, they refer to themselves as Niwi or Kutsitbududi.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm reading now. This is, Google, so I'm not sure if it's right, but this says the origins of the word ghost shoot are a bit ambiguous, has included a variety of spellings, and are most likely a pronunciation of Kusita, Kusiuta. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Kusitua, which according to somebody was derived from a word that means ashes, desert, or dry earth. And that's what the term that they use for people, that's what it means. People of dry earth, people of the desert. So I wonder if it's white people mispronouncing what they heard them calling themselves. And it kind of turned into ghost shoot.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if they heard that name and then he thought, oh, it's kind of like Goshen. And I don't know. I wonder. Well, what's up for next month? What pages are we reading?
Yeah, so next month we'll meet again first Saturday of the month, which is also the first, so March 1st, 10 a.m. Utah time, and we'll read the next two chapters. So those chapters are, let's see here. Um, January to March 1858, a bishop for Goshen. And then March to October of 1858 is just called Goshen. So it starts on page 159 to 176. 159, yeah, 159 to 176.
Marcia, did you get the article from Brent?